Check, check, check. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you all to our public meeting with the Connecticut Public Transportation Council. This is always an informative time for our committee members and the general public to learn quite a bit about public transportation in the state of Connecticut. The role of the Public Transportation Council has expanded over the last year. Membership has expanded, but the work and the advocacy and the ongoing efforts of its members is something that we hear about, we read about on a frequent basis. I'm excited to have this formal process before us today, in which we recognize the chair and the members of the council who are able to join us in advance of their annual meeting, and allows an opportunity for the members of this committee to hear directly from the leading advocates for public transportation in the state of Connecticut. Last year, we had a bill that specifically targeted many of the recommendations that they forwarded, and changed the composition of the council and the direction of the council. But we did that in cooperation and coordination with council members to reach what we think is a robust advocacy model that should be emulated, frankly, in agencies across the state. So we're excited to hear about how that process has unfolded for the last year, and some ideas and recommendations that they may have about how we improve public transportation across the state. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my Senate co-chair, Senator Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see so many people around the circle here, as well as filling the seats in the room. And I'm glad to be back and glad to be hearing from the newly formed Connecticut Transportation Council. I know you have a lot of returning members, which is exciting, and a lot of new folks participating in the process. And I'm just so grateful to have you as a real conduit between riders of public transportation across the state of Connecticut, the legislature, the DOT, and really advocating on their behalf. So glad to hear, glad to see you here today, and looking forward to hearing from you. And I will pass it back. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to turn it over to one of the longtime proponents and chief protectors of the Public Transportation Council in its former form, my Senate ranking member, Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I can count the entire legislative body in a truly bipartisan basis when that occurred to protect and ensure that our commuters are protected and their voices are heard, as so many of your board members have done. So I'm excited about the newly revamped council that will not only include rail commuters, but bus transit and all other aspects of commuter transit. So again, this has true bipartisan support, and ultimately it is a voice that you give to the commuters, to the legislative body. So this is a get together that's long overdue beyond the Zoom world that we used to live in. So it's great to see all of you, and thank you for your volunteer services on behalf of commuters in the state of Connecticut. I want to thank the leadership of this committee as well for recognizing that voice and giving them that through our legislative process. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you. And before I turn it over, I want to recognize my House ranking member, Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to everybody. It's great to see everybody. I think it's already all been said. We are all here on a very bipartisan basis to work with you, and I look forward to hearing from this newly formed, although the faces are all very familiar, and I look forward to hearing from each of you. So thank you, and thank you for everyone for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And before we turn it over officially to you, Mr. Chairman, from one chairman to another, I would like to say thank you so much for the work that you've put in to ensuring the robustness of this council, to ensure that the vision that we sort of worked through last spring, we spent a lot of time on Zoom calls, going over some different ideas. You and your members made yourself very available to us as we thought through the future of this council. And I want to say thank you for the amount of time and effort and steadfastness you put behind the vision that you have for Connecticut public transportation. And I just wanted to say thank you sincerely for that. And with that, I will turn it over to you, as this is your meeting.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that. And by the way, do love the bipartisanship. I like the whole ranking member thing. That's awesome. So I am very grateful for the members who have showed up here today. I know certainly on a Wednesday at 3 o'clock, you guys have busy schedules, and it's very impactful and meaningful for us that you're here. I just want to give you an overview of the last year since we met. Then Kate will talk a little bit about some of our legislative priorities, and then Doug and Zell will, I'm sure, weigh in where they feel appropriate. I will tell you, when we met here a year ago, there was that discussion about how do we advocate for not only rail riders, but transit users. I will tell you, a little of us were skeptical at first. It's a big charge, right? And some of us are volunteers and we wear other hats. But I will tell you that we have so sincerely done everything that we could to embrace the charge that you guys set forth. And represent Chair Lamar and Chair Cohen were very gracious with their time. We did meet, and I think there's some really good language that you kept in here, like allowing 8 returning members to stay on to kind of help the transition, which was certainly a key. So in the last year, I will tell you that in that spirit, we have changed our logo. We have updated our website to include the transit piece. We have really sought out outstanding candidates, Chance Carter, Vesta Fio, and Al Sylvester, 3 transit users, and we have aggressively, as many of you know, we have aggressively and super aggressively and uber aggressively tried to get those spots filled. We have 3 remaining spots, 2 from the governor's office that we have also given candidates to, and the ranking members here I know are close to moving forth. That will make us full. And quite frankly, the charge was for 4 transit members. We think we'll end up at about 6 to 7 transit users. So we really think we really attempted to meet the spirit of the statute. A couple other things which I think is real neat symbolism is we did elect officers. I was reelected as chair. Kate is vice chair, and a gentleman by the name of Blaise Leviton, whose wife is about this close to having a baby, couldn't make the trip here today, was elected secretary. But we do plan to have another vice chair. We're going to intentionally pick a rail vice chair and a transit vice chair so that both groups are represented. So that's another step that we'll take to meet the charge. We have already begun to meet with some of our transit providers. We met with Doug Holcomb from the Greater Hartford Transit District. This evening, after we spend time with you, we'll go to the Greater Hartford Transit District and spend time with Vicki Shotland and Mary Bijou, and we'll learn a little bit about their operations. So we continue to learn and do what we can to be transit advocates. A few more things before I turn it over to Kate. I will tell you that we do recognize that we have a lot to learn in the area of transit, and so it was super important that we get outstanding transit representatives. The year has not been without some challenges. I'll be honest, there is still data that we were looking for when we met here a year ago that we still do not have. What I consider to be very simple data, on-time percentage and ridership for just the 4 main stations on the New Haven line. Simple things like that you would think you'd want to know that metric, right? On-time percentage from New Haven to Grand Central Terminal, that's nice, but that doesn't tell the folks, along the line, Bridgeport or, and again, major stations, Stamford, what their on-time percentage is. So we still struggle to get some of those metrics. We are hopeful that we'll really start to get more transit metrics as we go through, and that's on our list. And then just the last challenge, which I'll say that we work through, and I just try to be a straight shooter and be as honest as possible. I still feel that we struggle at times with our relationship with the Department of Transportation. Simple things like being invited. So previously, I will tell you that we went to every single press conference along the that pertained to rail. Not only did we attend them, we were speakers. Now they don't even tell us when they are. Things like press releases for locomotives, new locomotives, or the Amtrak work. They don't tell us, they don't talk to us about. We hear that after the fact. So I will tell you, whether it be attending press events, being aware of press events, being aware of major news issues, we still struggle. We talk to them about it. We share that with them. And so that remains a challenge. We are going to see if we can meet with the commissioner. We meet with so many people to try to work on that relationship, because the things that get announced, I'm not joking. 98% of the time I hear from a reporter about major initiatives, and we're advocates. We just want to help. We are the users. So there's room for growth there in that part of the relationship. And so that's So I wanted to talk to you about all the good, but I wanted to lay out some of the challenges as well. So that's my little preamble there before I turn it over to Kate.
Thanks, Jim. My name's Kate Rosen. I'm the Vice Chair of the Connecticut Public Transportation Council. I'm going to be speaking through our legislative priorities for this session and for this year. This will not be a surprise to anyone, but our main priority, top of the list, is enhanced funding for Shoreline East. We propose restoring funding back to 100% of its pre-COVID levels. This restoration is not just about what the service was, but what it could be. Frequent and reliable service drives ridership. This is something that we kind of, I think, say at every single one of our meetings. And we've seen this in the response to enhancements along the Waterbury line and the Hartford line. And those become more than just about ridership. They come about supporting the economic vitality of the region and also housing. And so these things have to kind of all intertwine together. The importance of Shoreline East extends beyond local benefits. Amtrak CEO Stephen Gardner was here in January for an event with the governor and the commissioner of DOT. And he said 1/3 of all jobs in the region are within 5 miles of the Northeast Corridor, and 80% of the population is within 25 miles. Shoreline East is a vital artery of that corridor, connecting communities. It fosters economic opportunities, and its enhancement is a strategic opportunity for Connecticut to build along that corridor and get people off of I-95. So by fully funding Shoreline East, we're committing to a future where public transportation is a catalyst for economic development and a cornerstone for sustainable community planning. So this move will also not only improve the quality of life for countless Connecticut residents who have to work and live along that corridor, but it will also promote environmental sustainability and economic prosperity. Our next item that we are interested in, as Jim alluded to, is data transparency and accessibility. To better assess and approve our services in the state of Connecticut, we frequently request detailed information on major station on-time performance, ridership, violent crimes, and bus statistics. And something that's been brought up by the advocacy groups quite frequently lately is the cost associated with supportive technology such as Royale and Viva, which are the apps that bus and transit users use to book their tickets or to see when their bus and train is coming. We also are interested in administrative and financial support for the council. The effectiveness of the council is contingent on having support. We maintain our website and the administration. We are committed to doing more of our meetings on site. And so we've come here today. We'll be in Hartford this evening. Our next meeting will be in New London. In order to be able to be inclusive to all of our council members who may not live in that region, we need to be able to have Zoom capabilities, and that involves having a screen and a camera system, nothing that's too elaborate, but these are things that are coming out of the pockets of council members, and we are all obviously volunteers. The council also lends its voice to advocacy efforts that are largely spearheaded by other groups, and that would be fare free buses for youth. We are agnostic at this point on fare free for everyone, but we do like the idea and support the idea of the next generation of transit users by supporting fare free buses for under 25. Connecticut uses the UPass system, which is for our university students and our public, but we would like to explore maybe supporting that within our private colleges as well. As many cars and kids out of cars is great. And this is not something that is without precedent. The state of Washington has their ORCA card, and that is actually across all of their local transit systems. And that is all children can get on the bus and go, and they can use their school ID. If they're younger than school ID age, they can go. And it gives them freedom of movement that we've kind of lost in recent generations. So we think that that's important. We are also supportive of transit-oriented development initiatives. Obviously, the more that we can do, as kind of reference to Stephen Gardner's thing, that we have so many people living within 5 miles of our systems, building around those to support people using that infrastructure feels really important. So in closing on that, these priorities underscore our commitment to a future where public transportation is not just an option, but a preferred choice for the residents of Connecticut. And by addressing these key areas, we can build a more connected, sustainable, and equitable transportation ecosystem. So thank you for your time.
Zell or Doug, you want to add anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, team. Without trying to conflate any of the issues that are our legislative priorities for the entire council, some things that are coming up with regards to how do we get more users in the system? And more users build more support, they build more ridership, they also build more revenue for systems. We've talked a little bit about how close people live and proximities. Other issues that are surrounding the public transportation space, transportation network companies. It's not clear based on the legislation whether or not TNCs are intended to be included in our charge. They are included in the transit office at the DOT. And so it's something for the commission or the transportation committee to think through whether you want Uber, Lyft, taxis, other forms of transit to fall under this commission. We'll be launching an electric bike share system, same element. It's a transit system in New Haven, Connecticut. Whether or not you want those also to be a purview of the council will be something to think through for the future. We talk a lot again about how to get more people on the systems. There's a last mile, first mile gap in Connecticut, and the first mile, last mile gap means how do you get to the middle mile and how do you get away from the middle mile? Middle mile being our bus and our rail systems. Obviously, there's a large push from the Connecticut DOT lately with regards to funding of bus shelters, and we're really excited that I think it's up to $18 million in the latest budget, which is tremendous amount of effort. There are thousands of bus shelters in Connecticut, and this will be a first down payment on equitable access for the bus systems. But more importantly, if you can't walk to the shelter, you can't use the shelter. And so sidewalk funding, it's really pedestrian, pardon the pun, but it is really important to get people onto our transit systems. Some other thoughts that are, again, about how do we get people into the system? More people makes it better. One of the things is free parking, and people don't like to talk about this. Professionally, I manage parking for a living, and so I think about parking a lot. And I enjoyed some free parking today at the LOB. Thank you. However, when employers give out free parking and only free parking is the only transportation benefit for their staff, there's a definite prioritization of single occupant vehicle or driving yourself to work. And so one of those elements is our own work as governments, and I'm not immune to it. My own staff have free parking, and we work on trying to negotiate this through our union contracts. One thing we were able to do this year was put in a parking cash out provision. Parking cash out is a term of industry. It's a way for employers to offer people that do not drive a benefit for not driving to work. And so you'll see the Seattle region, you'll see other major regions focusing on parking cash out as one of those incremental steps to help getting people to think outside the car. And parking cash out for us at the New Haven Parking Authority means if someone opts out of the free parking benefit, they're guaranteed, we'll give them $50 a month or a bus pass. So it's a literal way to pay people not to drive themselves to work. The other element of that is parking minimums in general. And so I know there's been a lot of conversations in other committees about land use and about how to get more people in Connecticut and prepare for more people in Connecticut. I'm a firm believer that we have a growth coming, and it's a growth we haven't seen for a few generations, and I'm excited to be here in Connecticut for that growth. Parking minimums is a big challenge for this with regards to forcing people to pay for parking that the project may or may not need. It's something for the broader legislature to think about, possibly not this committee, but it's something that really does impact transit users and transit ridership. Last two, before I turn it over to Zell to talk about the eastern side of the state, one of the great changes to the the statutes recently has been liability and the rail right of way. So the Connecticut DOT is now able to start studying rails to trails, and what I challenge everyone in the committee is thinking through all of our available rail rights of way throughout the state of Connecticut. For generations, they were not to be utilized for trails, but trails getting to train stations is a great way to actually allow more people access. And now that we've changed that liability law, there's opportunities to restudy your community's abandoned rail rights of way. And I'll just mention again about one last point before turning to Zell, which is redundancy. Our number one legislative priority is to get the Shoreline East back to a level of funding that makes the transit system usable. And, you know, I was in Branford this morning, and there's not a lot of people in the Branford parking lot taking the Shoreline East right now for the train station. It's because you can only go one way, and a one-way transit system is not very effective if you're trying to sleep at home at night. And so in addition to funding levels, there's other redundancies that we can help create. So the 950 Express is a redundancy for the Hartford line. There's other bus routes that could be redundancy for Shoreline East, the 201, the 641, and the 643. Those three bus routes connect all of the Shoreline East train stations, but they don't connect with each other. And so there's an opportunity to create a sort of like the express route overlay that could help train customers get home if there were a train failure, as well as if there's a schedule gap. And with that, I just want to thank everyone again for the opportunity to serve. It's a privilege and an honor, and I'll turn it over to my colleague Zell.
Hello, I'm Zell Stever, a member of the group here. I came on in the old Rail Council and have migrated to the new Connecticut Public Transportation Council, and I'm very pleased to have this new opportunity to bring the rail and the buses together. But I would like to start by saying that please don't confuse that rails does not equal buses, or buses do not equal rails. They have very different functions. They can be used to overlap, but they are very different. One is on a fixed railroad and goes from point A to point B, and you don't want to wander off that. The buses, however, have a whole series of options and how they get from point A to point B. And herein lies part of the problem, is that means taking the buses on our roadways. And what we're already experiencing, at least in the eastern sector of Connecticut along I-95, and I'm something of an expert on that because I've been riding that particular road ever since I went to college at UConn, going from Darien on one end of the state to stores on the other end of the state up I-95. And so I remember when you hardly saw a car on I-95 east of New Haven. And now you get in line to use that road. And you all are aware that the Department of Transportation has got now a major effort underway to look at how to increase the capacity and the speed that's now on the I-95 between New Haven and Rhode Island. And it's a huge study, and yet we hear claims that there will be not any extra lanes created on that road. And I drive that to go see my children in the western part of Connecticut and in New York City. And I'm thinking there's something wrong with this disconnect here. We have now cut trains in Connecticut on Shoreline East to 40% of what they were. And I get on 95 and I am then in traffic. And so what could potentially take 2.5 hours to get to the other end of the state now can take us upwards to 5 hours to get to the other end of the state. Now I'm retired and I still collect my paycheck in the form of a retirement. But there are a lot of people who can't afford to do that sort of thing, have those kinds of regular delays on I-95. And without Shoreline East, we essentially have no option. If you have to get from New Haven to New London or from New London to New Haven, there is no other way of doing it. You can't fly, you can't take a boat. It's a heck of a bike ride. and it's impossible to walk. And so what we have done is we have forced more people onto the roadway effectively this last year. And it's well, I don't have the numbers because that's not my thing. My qualitative observation is that it is really increased dramatically. Now, what we also know on the other side of this equation is that if we're going to have effective rail, it has to be operated frequently, and that usually means from like 5 in the morning until 10 at night. It has to be reliable. In other words, you have to be able to depend upon it. And it has to be operated in a way that gets from people from point A to point B, essentially where they want to go. And that's really important. If you don't meet all three of those criteria, it simply is not going to work. And so what we're headed to right now is, and you've seen this in the press, a downwards death spiral of Shoreline East. Now, that's not to say you can't bring it back. You probably can, but at a huge expense and a lot of angry people. I mean, there are people now who won't talk to me because somehow I'm supposed to help get them on a rail. And I say, well, you know, we've lost this huge capacity on Shoreline East. And so I really encourage you to, even though it's a short session, to look at this. And as some of you already know, I've already testified before the Appropriations Committee requesting that the Shoreline East be restored to full funding as soon as possible. I don't want to see us wait another year. I don't want to see us wait another 6 months. It needs to be done. Now, you've seen in the press that it's been said that, oh, we don't have the equipment. Oh, yes, we do have the equipment. We have got plenty of equipment to do this. If we have to divide the train set into from 4 cars to 2 cars, let's do it. But we need to get people back on the train, and it's going to take a long time. You've heard the argument as well that, oh, there's not TOD opportunities along Shoreline. And I would have to say that I think that's a misconception. Certainly in the towns that I've been involved with more recently, that is the eastern section or east of New London, the towns are ready and have zoning in place. And what they need is the T part of this equation. And I might say buses don't meet the T equation. If you really want to make it work, you already have to use rail to make that work on the T part of the equation, transit-oriented development. New London's got a lot of capacity there to do that. Groton certainly has the same thing, and so does so does Stonington. And if you go across the border to our friends and colleagues in Rhode Island, they have the same issue. They want to be able to have transit-oriented development. Now, a couple of things that I should bring to your attention is that last year, 2 years ago, you actually funded the Department of Transportation to come up with a feasibility study to look at expanding Shoreline East from New London all the way to Rhode Island. And that document has come out. I've got a copy of it in my hand. It is not just this document. It is really this document, which with all the appendixes essentially ends up being 800 pages. I don't recommend you read all this because you will spend a lot of time up late nights. It is impossible to go through to read. I do, however, recommend that you seriously consider this document, and it has been forwarded to you all. I don't know whether you'll be interested in holding a hearing on that. It is one of these documents that says on one hand and on the other hand, but the final numbers, when you look at it, suggests that feasibility of extending rail from New London to Rhode Island is very, very sensible. Now, so that's one point. The second point is that in the last year, I've spent some time with the Rhode Island folks. And if you're able to come to our Rail Council meeting in next month in New London on the 20th, you'll hear a number of people coming over from the border, not as raiders, but as interested parties to support rail. They very much want to see rail go from not only New London to Westerly. They want to see it go all the way to Boston with, by the way, a stop at TF Green, the big airport there. This is important from Groton's point of view, from New London's point of view, because submarines are manufactured in both Connecticut and in Rhode Island. And so there is a normal path that goes between the facilities, and this is where rail could be of big help on this. Now, I've talked a lot about sort of rail as it relates to transportation per se. But the other thing that I want to bring to your attention, I know some of you on this committee have some serious experience with this, and that is, as you all well know, Connecticut produces greenhouse gases. And in fact, we're in a non-attainment area as it relates to air pollution from EPA. And we know that in Connecticut, basically 40% of the greenhouse gases come from the transportation sector. Most of that comes from light trucks and cars. And if we can put people on trains, we will dramatically reduce greenhouse gases, and we will also reduce the vehicle miles traveled. And I think that's a very important part of this thing. And then finally, I would like to mention that, as you all well know, the federal government passed the Infrastructure Act 2 years ago, and there is a huge amount of money that is out there and available to this state to make the kinds of connections that need to be done to make this happen. So I, with that, be happy to answer any questions that you may have of all four of us. And thank you.
And if I could, Al Sylvester, transit representative, there on the left, that just came in. Hi, Al, how are you?
Thank you all for your testimony here today and for bringing up your experiences and legislative priorities, also thoughts and feelings about the future direction of this council and the role that the legislature can take to support it and to sort of recognize what you see on a day-to-day basis, talking to your constituents, our members, our residents of the state of Connecticut that come to you oftentimes when they're researching who to complain to. They might get your phone number or your email before they get mine. Right. And so I think you present a very accessible place for so many of our residents to go. And so you hear things quite frequently that may take us a couple of days or weeks before we hear from that same constituent. So it is great hearing from you. You guys are invested your time, your energy, your effort, mostly on a volunteer basis to hear from these folks, to dream about the future of transit. And it's reflected in your passion that you bring here today. And oftentimes in legislation that we consider. So I just want to again say thank you. I know it's a tireless service that you guys gladly provide to us and the state of Connecticut, and it comes with my deep gratitude and thanks. There's a number of questions that folks have. I'm going to start with my Senate co-chair, Senator Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for your comments and just taking the time to be here with us today and really working with us as a committee so that we can understand the needs of folks all across the state. I'd venture to say you're probably preaching to the choir with many of us here in terms of Shoreline East, particularly myself. I can think of really no greater disappointment to me as a legislator over the past 5 years than the cuts to Shoreline East. I think we've completely failed our central shoreline residents in this regard. You know, I think we're failing business partners across the state of Connecticut. I think we're failing our hospitality and entertainment industry, and we're certainly failing our environment. So we need to do all that we can. I'm sure the council is aware that the committee has raised a concept on this, and you know, we will be having a public hearing on this, and I would encourage you all to be there. I suspect that you're hearing from folks all across the state of Connecticut, not just our central shoreline residents when it comes to this. So thank you. I'd love to hear a little bit more, and it doesn't have to be today, but I think, you know, in terms of that collaboration and cooperation that we've established between the council and the committee, a little bit more about redundancy reductions and how you see those, because you are sort of front line when it comes to hearing from folks about what their needs are and where we could look to greater efficiency on our rails as well as bus lines. I would also say in that regard, like, there's been a lot of conversation about cuts to Shoreline East and whether buses could be used as a replacement to Shoreline East. I hear, you know, from a couple of you here today that there is really, they're very different. Their riderships are very different. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. You know, frequently as a shoreline legislator, I hear, oh, well, yeah, we don't have Shoreline East, but just have them take the 201. You know, there is a lack of connectivity, as I'm sure you all know, with the buses and getting to, you know, connection on the New Haven line or other lines as well. So that's a concern. And I'm just wondering, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you're hearing. And again, that doesn't necessarily have to be today, although it certainly can be more broadly about the types of things that you're hearing from folks across the state of Connecticut. But I think just in terms of ongoing collaboration between the two of us, I think it's really important for us to know exactly with some more specificity about what would be good going forward so that we can address some of those issues. I'm really pleased to hear about your legislative agenda. I'm particularly interested in fare-free busing for youth. That's a really great idea and something that I don't think we've explored fare-free busing, obviously, but I don't think we've looked particularly at that. So that's something I'd be interested in going forward as well. So those are my comments for today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mention a few quick things. I'll save most of my comments for public hearing on the Shoreline East, but I just want to leave a message while there's a lot of folks here. I think there's a certain irony that the New Canaan branch, for instance, or the Danbury branch were given 100% service when they were in the 30 percentile ridership range. Today, New Canaan branch ended the year with 48% of their pre-COVID ridership, not too far from where Shoreline East was, and yet they're going back to 100%. So I mean, this whole hey, there's no ridership is kind of interesting to me. Waterbury branch, there could be no greater argument for the restoration of service. The Waterbury branch, which I'm fortunate to be a user of, and quite frankly, I do take transit if there's a problem with the train. However, I got to get on the Greater Hartford route, and then I got to take 12 different stops. So most days that's never my first option. But I will tell you, they added 7 trains to the Waterbury branch, which is for them a 44% increase in service. The Waterbury branch is the only branch that has exceeded their pre-COVID ridership. It's such an easy model. If you provide service, people come. Look at the Waterbury branch. There's no greater evidence. And then someone's got to, from the Department of Transportation, the governor's office, has to explain why New Canaan got 100% service when they had 30% ridership. That's bizarre to me. But and then one other thing is, I'll just do this broadly. Things we hear from residents in the state of Connecticut are time for Connecticut. Reducing the amount of time that it takes from New Haven to Grand Central. The Super Express lines are great, but there's only 4 stops, and if you live in Darien, you're not going to go to Stamford for an express, or you're not going to drive over. So the time for Connecticut is something we hear a lot, and we hear a lot about the app that we know is in progress, the single ticket, right? We hear a ton about that. We hear a ton about reducing the daily line, the daily commute, and then we hear a lot about Quiet Car, the restoration of the Quiet Car, which Metro North is really adamant about not bringing back. We hear a lot about that. So just broadly, those are some things that we hear about.
That's great insight. I appreciate that, Jim. Senator Wong, followed by Representative Carney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important. I do agree that this legislative body supports the restoration of Shoreline East. I think we were all disappointed and befuddled by this. But I would also add furthermore that every one of our transit lines deserves to be supported. I struggle with the challenge that New Canaan is getting this while Shoreline East is not, because we're defeating the ultimate purpose of supporting mass transit. And that is to get cars off the road, reduce congestion, reduce air pollution, and to create a world-class mass transit system that can be relied upon, can be depended on to get people to and from, that is a quality of life, but also an economic vitality issue. So for me, I struggle with this whole process in regards that we devastated Shoreline East. We cut the schedule for Metro North and raise fares while other lines have been allocated funds. The picking winners and losers defeats the ultimate purpose of mass transit as a whole. And I know there was a concern and conversation in regards to budgetary concerns. We've heard that there was COVID impacted scheduling and utilization changes, but does not get away. All of that rationale is short term to our goal in supporting mass transit for all the reasons I cited earlier. So I would offer that we're going to do our darndest to revitalize Shoreline East. We want to engage the communications and the mission to supporting mass transit to get cars off the road and reduce climate change, air pollution concerns. And I hope that we're united in that in every aspect of the lines. I think the second part is, even though Zell cited that, rail is very different than bus transit, but it's still getting people to and from. And it's critical. And that was part of the mission of combining all of you. But, Douglas mentioned a very important point, the last mile. I think I don't know what you vision your role in regards to the commuter rail council, the commuter council, to look at the last mile. And I think one of the things is to look at master plans in regards to roadways for people to be able to get off the train, get off their buses, and still have a safe venue or a safe pathway or a safe plan to be able to get to that final mile. So I don't know if that's part of the purview of what you have as a rail. I was appreciative of what was mentioned earlier in addressing that last mile, half mile. And I know for us as a committee, we thought about that as well. But I think the last thing I want to leave on this is the fact that communications and respect for the role that you have. I think one of the important things that from the onset, when we debated this issue in regards to your role in representing commuters and now transit-oriented aspect, is you have a voice representing the people who use these services. And one of the important elements that we retained was your ability to ask governmental bodies for information. That role and that authority still exist within the construct of the new council that we did. So I hope that you are able to remind the bodies that when you request this information, that they have a responsibility to provide that for you to best service the constituency that you're representing, that you are an authorized body that has that authority to be respected and to show that kind of accountability to information. I know for us as a legislative committee, when we request information, we're fortunate enough to get it. I can't imagine the frustration that you have in wanting to look at schedule times, arrival times, to be able to better understanding of efficiencies, that you don't get that information. And it's a year. It's a year. So I don't understand it unless something has changed in regards to the authority that has been authorized to you. You're not being heard and your mandate is not being fulfilled. So I wanted to just simply raise that. Unless the rules have changed, you have that authority. We have not taken that away. So on a final note, I think as we have been lucky enough to have the equipment and the technology with Zoom and other members to be able to participate and get this important information, could any of the members provide, when was talked about Zoom technology, to afford many of your all of your volunteer members that have full-time jobs to be able to actively participate and fully engage in your meetings. What would that cost? What would that cost from a standpoint of $20,000, $30,000, 50 to be able to make a grant request? I ask that of you to be able, I know it's critical, but unless we know what you need, it's just a number out there. So thank you for allowing me these questions, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And Senator Wong, I think definitely think New Canaan should be at 100%. I didn't mean to imply that I didn't think they should be.
Excellent. And I'll just reiterate, I think it's important for us to have a context for what the budget request would be, sort of like an operational standpoint, like how do we support the multitude of venues you want to be in and the technological supports. Like we've empowered you kind of differently than we empower other councils in the state. We've given you greater authority and greater sort of responsibility as well. And so I think it's reasonable for us to consider what natural supports for that would look like. So if we get a sense for what you would need on an annualized basis, that would be really helpful to the deliberations of this committee. Representative Kane, did you have any questions or no? Okay. Representative Carney, and if there's anyone else who'd like some comments before we move forward, let me know.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for coming here today. You know, I represent a few towns along the Shoreline East Corridor. So I would definitely like to see that go back to 100% if at all possible. I guess my question is, you know, I'm looking at the feasibility study for Eastern Connecticut and the potential to have the rail go to Rhode Island along, I would imagine it'd be similar to how Shoreline East is now. It'd be on Amtrak's tracks. My concern, and I don't know if you have any comments on it, is one of the things that happened in the district I represent and East a couple of years ago was related to high-speed rail. And the federal government had a proposal to come in and basically create a new track that would make it easier to get through southeastern Connecticut, because right now it's really not conducive to getting those higher speed trains. And there is some worry that might come back. So I guess I'm just wondering, I mean, my only concern is, you know, where is, you know, you have to take into consideration the existing, I guess, environment, structures and everything that is there now versus putting in a new rail that may displace some of that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it is something that does concern a lot of constituents I represent.
Maybe I can take that one. You may not have heard about this, but there is a $4 million appropriation that's been given to Amtrak from the federal government to reopen that potential high-speed line, the so-called Saybrook to Kenyon. And I did attend a briefing, not in Connecticut, but in Rhode Island several weeks ago, where the project manager from Amtrak did come and say they were going to reopen that whole issue of what to do. And they basically said that they were going to be looking at all the options. And I thought it was generally pretty well received. I'd make this point. Amtrak is basically set up to go from major city to major city, and that's what they want to do. And that's different from what maybe the state of Connecticut or the state of Rhode Island wants to do, which is to get people from point A to point B in a reasonably fast way without all the hassles that you have on the road. And it's very clear that the conversation between the states and Amtrak is crucial going forward. And so I would hope that we in the state of Connecticut will join in on that discussion that's going to be taking place over the next 18 months under the direction of Amtrak. It's really, really important. Now, in terms of a point that I guess I think it was you, Representative Lamar, about speed. Basically, the NEC, which is the Amtrak line that runs along our shoreline. That is one of the most sophisticated rail lines in the country. I mean, there is no better rail line than what runs from New York to Boston. It has been upgraded. A lot of the curves have been straightened out. We have it all electrified now. It is there for the using. It is in the ground. We don't have to get a shovel out to make that work. But the trick's going to be, I think, Representative Carney, is how Amtrak plays with both the state of Connecticut and with the state of Rhode Island to make this really effective in the long run. I mean, just the problem we've got in southeastern Connecticut is, boy, the turns that you go through New London and then you go to Mystic and those couple of turns and a couple of the bridges make life much more difficult because you can't bring it up. But there's a difference in terms of that and buses. And let me just make this one point. I've been up front in the M8s when they're going down to New Haven from New London, and that puppy runs up around 90 miles an hour, no problem at all. And it really scoots down the track. I hope buses won't be scooting down I-95 at 90 miles an hour. That is just simply unacceptable to me. So there's a big difference in terms of just how fast you can run this equipment. Now, Amtrak would like to run up around 150 miles an hour. And then that provides a lot of serious challenges in terms of spacing between trains, switching back and forth. But that conversation is going on, and it needs to be carefully monitored by you all, by our State Department of Transportation, and our colleagues from the other states, because it only works if you connect it all together. And I guess the final thing to say about this is that this link between New London and Rhode Island, and actually it's not just westerly, it goes all the way up to Wickford Junction. That is the one link where there's missing any regional rail. And if we can fill that in, it would make a huge difference for everybody.
No, I appreciate your comments on that, and certainly asking us to keep an eye on those federal conversations, because I think it is very important that the legislature is involved. So thank you for that, and thank you all for serving.
Thank you, Representative Carney. Representative Berger-Cavallo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really just a quick comment. Having spoken probably from the moment I came onto this committee years ago to Kate at length about what her vision was and how she saw the state kind of holistically, especially as we were talking about rail. I know it's been touched upon by some of my colleagues up here, but I think to have to keep in mind when we have a hearing even specifically on Shoreline East, that when we're sitting in our seats in representing a specific region, we are kind of expected to take offense when our own district is not part of the conversation. So it is not to say that we don't want to see, we all very much want to see restoration of Shoreline East, but also, as you know, speaking as someone not too far from New Canaan, to be able to have that conversation and support Shoreline East, knowing that somewhere down the road there is a vision for the entire state, and to have that connectivity. I would just recommend that you keep that in mind in all of the conversations, because we really are very quick to be offended. We tend to have these conversations about our own specific area, and to be able to embrace what is happening elsewhere, I think is the key to getting us all to hear everything that you have to say. So that was really just me, almost the way I talk to my children. So I'm going to back off now and say thank you to all of you for all the work that you've done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I think that's a good way to talk about transit in this state, and like how we can build out the connectivity levels amongst all networks, the interplay between the last mile, the transit services, the rail services, the Shoreline East to the Hartford lines. Frankly, when I think of the successes of my tenure as chair of this committee, it's a lot of things that have to do with New Haven, of course, but it's also the Waterbury line, right? Like the first thing I think about is the Waterbury line, like how hard we worked to convince a lot of stakeholders to make that major investment. And I think we're at that point where tying it all together with this underlying vision is only going to happen with your support and the work that you've done. And it might not look like a bill that you normally see, an act concerning the Connecticut Public Transportation Council, but your work and the advice that you bring to each one of us informs so much of what we do. We started a program last year looking at all of the bus stops in the state of Connecticut, and that was largely informed by work that you guys helped provide. There were numerous conversations I've had on the side with, specifically with Doug Houselayden and Kate Rosen, which has informed numerous other aspects of transit policy in the state, independent of just the work itself. And so I think there's so much this work that happens internal to our committee that comes from the memberships of your council. And I'm deeply appreciative of all the time and effort that you guys put into that. Representative Kennedy, did you have a final remark as well?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to thank you. I think it's pretty much been summed up. So I represent parts of Milford and Orange, and we're under construction for our TOD finally in downtown. That's going to connect everything. And you've summed it up pretty well. It's all about connectivity, and Metro North needs to go somewhere. It's going to start in Milford and get into New Haven and continue on. So it is all about the end, where you're going to get to. So it's really important, but I do look forward to having you come to Milford one day when our construction is completed, and to have that beautiful TOD that we are going to have in our downtown. So it's very exciting. And just a quick comment on the youth fairs. I mean, we did discuss free fares, and I maybe not gone over well, but if we integrate that into our youth, our young kids starting at a younger age, and they start taking public transit, well, they'll just continue that. That's the only thing they'll really know. So, and a lot of kids don't even really want to drive. They want to be able to get to that area by whether it be by bus or by train. So I kind of like that idea. It's pretty neat, but we'll see how we go with it. And that's it. And I really thank you so much for all your input today. It's been very valuable. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that, I think, do you have something, Doug? Yeah, go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the moments. I'll try and be as brief as I can. I can be a little long-winded. So I think a lot about connections and about what we're trying to build in the state of Connecticut. And there's a constellation effect that happens when you link more cities together. And the investments that the federal government is making in electric boat on the east sides of our state need the supportive networks of Providence, Rhode Island, of the MBTA, of the Boston region, to really get that cumulative effect to maximize the investments in the state of Connecticut so that we can have a great future for everyone here. I was a science major, biochemistry, biophysics, and I think a lot about the orbital energies and how do you get an electron from one orbital to the next? And the answer is a lot of connections, a lot of smashing together. So how do we get to that next level in Connecticut? We need to link a lot more of our people together, and not just Connecticut networks, the Northeast Corridor networks. And so by creating an extra rail system to the east, it might sound redundant, but redundancy is the point. And creating more of those linkages to the northeast side of New England would really help bring investment to Connecticut. I wanted to touch base about Senator Wong. You mentioned the last mile, first mile. There is a committee of I don't know if it's the right terminology, committee of cognizance, the Connecticut Bike Ped Advisory Board. Al Sylvester is a member of that board. They talk a lot about last mile, first mile, and there's a lot of efforts going on to improve the biking and walking of Connecticut. One thing that would maximize these, I think the most important project in transportation from the transit side right now, this is just me, this is not the council, would be a bus rapid transit system on Route 1 from New York to New Haven. And there's a feasibility study that the Connecticut DOT performed, and the number of jobs in Milford and Orange that are inaccessible to New Haveners or to Milford residents or Orange residents, simply because the bus stops literally do not have sidewalks that connect property to property. The bus rapid transit system would create a very fast, efficient, connected network, but most importantly, handicap accessible sidewalks between each property. And pennies on the dollar, what we could actually get back. It would be a massive investment, but also a massive opportunity for growth and increasing the amount of free time a resident of Connecticut has by decreasing their commute time is a secret of government. This is what we have to be working on, improving quality of life. And part of that is giving people time back to be with their families, not sitting in traffic, not not worrying about if their bus is going to come. Additionally, with the redundancy, something that I just wanted to bring up was the payment systems. Jim mentioned that we've been hearing a lot about it from the Connecticut DOT. How does each of the payment systems work? So just going from New Haven to say Fairfield, you're on 4 different bus systems, and each of them in prior years had different fare box technology. But now, thankfully, with the investments in an app, we've been able to use one app that kind of gets you around. But again, making that more legible, making that more user friendly. The DOT is doing a great job working on this, and we really wholeheartedly appreciate it and support that work. And I'll just mention one last thing, which is Shoreline East contract is coming up very, very soon. And so there is a big conversation happening in the next 2 years, whether Amtrak will be servicing this rail or not. I hope some of you have taken the Hartford line. That's not serviced by Amtrak. That's serviced by TASI, which is a new entrant to the East Coast. They're mostly in California. And so there's a lot of conversations happening with regards to just how to provide that best service. And over the next 2 years, I think it'll be a great opportunity to rethink, revision. But I'll close with our number one legislative point, which is full funding for Shoreline East this year. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions? Jim, do you want to plug your meeting dates and how easily and accessible you are and how folks can find you?
One for your time very much, and you stuck it out for the whole time, so thank you. We meet the 3rd Wednesday of each month, quarterly, January, March, June, and September. We meet with the Department of Transportation. Those are our quarterly meetings, but we do post our meetings on our website. We do post them online, and there is always a Zoom link. So hope to see you. Thank you.
And Jim, if a member of the public wanted to come talk to you at one of those meetings, are they open and available?
Yes, we definitely have a public portion. We have a wonderful commuter. I want to plug her, Miriam Grossman, who's come to every single meeting for the better part of 2 years. And she comes and she gives us her input every single meeting, and we do the best we can to follow up on it. Thank you.
I know Miriam well.
There you go.
Are there any
I
other?
also might just add that you are very active on social media too. So folks might want to give that check that out.
And with that, thank you again so much for the work and tireless efforts you put in on behalf of Connecticut consumers on a daily basis. Really appreciate it, and good luck tonight. Thank you. With that, everyone, we are done for the evening. We have a public hearing on February 26th, and I look forward to seeing you at 10 a.m.